The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Kaz Volkov pushed her mop bucket down the sterile corridors of Naval Special Warfare Command. Her maintenance uniform bore no indication of the wings she'd once worn, no hint of the cockpit that had been her cathedral for 8 years. The young SEALs barely glanced at her as they passed, their conversations peppered with operational jargon and weekend plans. To them, she was invisible, just another contractor keeping their world clean. What they didn't know was that 24 hours earlier, satellite imagery had detected unusual heat signatures in the Kandahar province. What they couldn't see was the classified briefing folder hidden beneath cleaning supplies in her cart. And what none of them suspected was that the woman methodically mopping their floors had once guided a damaged F-16 through a sandstorm with nothing but instinct and a prayer. The secure phone in the janitor's closet buzzed exactly at 6:30 hours. Kaz answered on the second ring, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heartbeat. "Cleantech Solutions, this is Volkov." The voice on the other end was crisp, familiar. "Mirror Lake, this is Control. We have a situation." Mirror Lake, her old call sign, one she hadn't heard in 3 years. The name carried weight, memories of aerial victories and a career that had ended not in flames but in paperwork and politics. Through the small window, she could see the morning briefing beginning in the conference room. Officers gathered around a digital display showing satellite feeds from halfway around the world. She watched Commander Tor's gesture at thermal imaging, his expression grave. These men had trained for decades to handle impossible situations, but what was developing 8,000 miles away would require a different kind of expertise, one that currently wore a janitor's uniform and carried a security clearance nobody knew about. The morning sun cast long shadows across the base as Kaz made her decision. She set down the mop, removed her maintenance badge, and walked toward the conference room. Every step felt like crossing a threshold she'd never expected to cross again. The conversation stopped when she entered. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some confused, others annoyed. Commander Tors looked up from his briefing materials, his mouth already forming words of dismissal. But then he saw her eyes steady, calculating, completely unafraid. Something in her posture, the way she held her shoulders, made him pause. "Gentlemen," Kaz said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to emerge from nowhere, "we need to talk." The thermal satellite feeds showed heat blooms consistent with surface-to-air missile systems. The intelligence was fresh, the threat immediate. Somewhere over the Hindu Kush, American aircraft were flying into a trap that only one person in this room had the experience to identify. The woman they'd all ignored was about to become the most important person in the building. Kaz stepped closer to the display, her fingers already tracing flight patterns only she could see. The real mission was about to begin. Commander Tors studied the woman who had just walked uninvited into his classified briefing. Her maintenance uniform looked suddenly out of place, like a costume she'd outgrown. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to," he began, but Kaz cut him off with a gesture toward the satellite display. "Those aren't just heat signatures," she said, pointing to clusters of thermal blooms on the screen. "That's a coordinated SA-15 battery with mobile launchers. See how they're positioned in a triangle formation with overlapping coverage zones." The room fell silent. These were details that hadn't been in the initial intelligence assessment. The spacing suggests they're expecting low-altitude penetration. Whoever's flying into that airspace is walking into a calculated kill box. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the intelligence officer, leaned forward. "And you know this how exactly?" His tone carried skepticism mixed with curiosity. Kaz reached into her maintenance cart beneath the industrial cleaning supplies and retrieved a worn leather folder. Inside were wings, commendations, and a photograph of herself standing beside an F-22 Raptor, the ghost-gray aircraft gleaming in hangar lights. "'Cause I helped design the defensive protocols they're trying to counter," she said simply. "Captain Kazimiera Volkov, call sign Mirror Lake, Tactical Systems Officer, 1st Fighter Wing, 3 combat tour, 47 missions over contested airspace. I wrote half the manual on defeating integrated air defense systems. She paused, letting the information settle. I also identified the vulnerability in our standard penetration routes that these particular SAM sites are designed to exploit. The silence stretched until Torres found his voice. Captain, what exactly are you doing working maintenance at our facility? The question everyone wanted to ask hung in the air like smoke. Kaz's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, old pain, carefully contained. That's a conversation for another time, Commander. Right now, we have F-22s inbound to that target zone in 4 hours. Current flight plan has them using approach vector Charlie 7, which puts them directly over those SAM sites at optimal engagement altitude. She traced the route on the display. Unless someone warns them, we're about to lose some very expensive aircraft and very irreplaceable pilots. Torres glanced at Hayes, who was already pulling up communication protocols on his tablet. Why would you have access to current flight plans? Hayes asked, but his fingers were moving quickly, cross-referencing Kaz's credentials through secure channels. Because I never actually stopped working, Kaz replied. The janitor thing, deep cover assignment. I've been monitoring potential threats to this facility and others like it for 3 years. This morning's intelligence triggered protocols you don't know exist. She moved to the secure terminal and entered a series of codes that should have been impossible for someone with maintenance clearance to possess. The screen populated with real-time aircraft tracking data. 2 F-22 Raptors, call signs Viper 1 and Viper 2, were currently 2 hours out from the target zone. Their planned route overlaid perfectly with the SAM coverage area Kaz had identified. The trap was perfect, and the timing was running out. Torres looked from the screen to the woman who had just turned his morning briefing upside down. What do you need? The secure communications array hummed to life as Kaz's fingers moved across familiar controls. 3 years of pushing a mop had done nothing to dull the muscle memory of reaching out to aircraft in contested airspace. The encryption protocols had changed, but the fundamental architecture remained the same. She was back in her element, even if her element now existed in a converted janitor's closet. Viper Flight, this is Mirror Lake Actual. How copy? The transmission crackled through atmospheric interference. For a moment, only static answered. Then, cutting through the white noise, came a voice she recognized. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reaper Davidson, one of the finest pilots she'd ever worked with. Mirror Lake, this is Viper 1. Jesus Christ, Kaz, is that really you? We thought you were. The transmission cut off as Davidson processed the impossibility of hearing his former tactical controller's voice. What's your position? Last I heard, you were grounded pending. Stow it, Reaper, Kaz interrupted, her voice carrying command authority that bypassed rank and protocol. We have immediate threats to your mission. I need you to break from planned approach vector and hold at waypoint Delta for new routing. Through the conference room window, she could see Torres and his team scrambling to understand the dynamic that had just shifted their entire operational picture. Mirror Lake, Viper 2 here. The second voice belonged to Captain Alina Phoenix Marchetti, younger than Davidson but equally skilled. Our current approach has us over target in 90 minutes. Are you telling us to abort? Negative on abort, Phoenix. I'm telling you to trust me. Kaz's fingers danced across the keyboard, uploading tactical data that would reshape their entire mission profile. I'm transmitting updated intelligence on SAM positions. Your planned route puts you directly in the engagement envelope of a coordinated defense system. They're expecting you. The silence on the radio stretched for 30 seconds, an eternity in tactical communications. Then Davidson's voice returned, tight with concentration. Mirror Lake, Viper 1, we're seeing the SAM data now. How current is this intelligence? Thermal imaging from 40 minutes ago. Mobile launchers, so assume they've shifted position by 10%, but the engagement zones remain constant. Kaz paused, feeling the weight of 2 pilots' lives balanced on her analysis. Reaper, You remember the Helmand Valley run in 019. Same defensive setup, different terrain. Copy that. Phoenix, you getting this? Davidson's voice carried recognition now, the sound of a pilot remembering why he'd trusted this particular controller with his life multiple times before. Mirror Lake, what's our new approach vector? Kaz studied the topographical display, calculating angles of attack that would exploit the natural radar shadows cast by the mountain terrain. Vector Bravo 9, altitude Angels 15, approach from the northeast using the ridgeline mask. It adds 12 minutes to your flight time, but it keeps you below the engagement threshold until final approach. Behind her, she could hear Tors speaking quietly into his phone, probably explaining to someone much higher up the chain of command why a maintenance worker was now directing an active mission. She didn't care. Right now, the only things that mattered were two aircraft and the pilots inside them. The radio crackled again. Mirror Lake Viper 1, adjusting course to Bravo 9. Phoenix, form on me, we're going hunting. The F-22 Raptors banked hard to starboard, their angular forms cutting through thin air at 30,000 feet. From the cockpit of Viper 1, Lieutenant Colonel Davidson could see the mountain peaks of Afghanistan stretching endlessly below, each ridge a potential hiding place for the enemy systems that Kaz had warned them about. His hands moved automatically across the flight controls, while his mind processed the impossible situation of receiving tactical guidance from someone who was supposed to be out of the game. "Phoenix, how's your systems display looking?" he transmitted to his wingman. Captain Marchetti's F-22 held perfect formation 300 feet off his starboard wing, her aircraft's stealth profile making her nearly invisible even at close range. "All green, Reaper, but I'm picking up intermittent radar pings from the northeast. Could be the mobile unit's Mirror Lake identified." Marchetti's voice carried the focused calm of a pilot who had learned to trust her instincts. "Whatever put her back in the controller's seat, I'm glad she's there." Davidson agreed, though he couldn't shake his curiosity about how Kaz had ended up coordinating their mission from what appeared to be a Navy facility. 3 years ago, she'd been the most respected tactical systems officer in the Air Force, her ability to read enemy defensive patterns legendary among fighter pilots. Then came the incident, something involving a classified operation that had gone wrong, politics, and a career that had ended with disturbing abruptness. "Viper flight, Mirror Lake," Kaz's voice cut through his thoughts. "I'm showing new thermal blooms at grid reference 794 Alpha. Possible launcher repositioning. Adjust your approach vector 2 degrees south and increase altitude to Angels 20. Davidson's radar warning receiver remained quiet, but he'd learned to trust Mirror Lake's analysis even when his own systems saw nothing. "Copy, Mirror Lake. Adjusting course." He pulled back gently on the stick, feeling the Raptor climb through the thin air. At this altitude, the sky was a deep purple blue, the edge of space visible above them. "Mirror Lake Phoenix, question about the SAM threat. Are we looking at radar-guided or infrared seekers?" Marchetti's question revealed tactical thinking that went beyond simple flight adjustments. The type of missile system would determine their defensive options. "Mixed threat environment," Kaz responded immediately. "Primary units are radar-guided SA-15s, but I'm seeing heat signatures consistent with man-portable infrared systems as backup. They're layering their defenses, which means someone with serious tactical knowledge planned this ambush." Davidson felt his respect for their unseen enemy tick upward. Coordinated air defense systems required significant training and resources. This wasn't a random attack. It was a carefully planned trap designed to bring down exactly the type of high-value targets they represented. "Mirror Lake, any recommendations for defensive posture?" "Maintain current altitude and speed until final approach. Use the mountain masking to stay invisible to their primary radar. When you commit to the attack run, go fast and low. Make them choose between radar and infrared guidance. Most operators can't effectively coordinate both simultaneously. The landscape below shifted as they followed Kaz's routing, the approach vector taking them through terrain that provided natural concealment from ground-based radar systems. Davidson found himself falling into the familiar rhythm of trusting Mirror Lake's guidance, muscle memory from dozens of previous missions, where her voice in his headset had meant the difference between success and catastrophe. 2 minutes to initial point, he announced. Phoenix, weapons check. The real mission was about to begin. The target compound materialized on their targeting displays like a digital ghost, thermal imaging revealing structures that aerial reconnaissance had identified as a high-value weapons cache. Intelligence suggested the facility contained advanced anti-aircraft systems destined for terrorist networks throughout the region. The mission was straightforward: neutralize the threat, minimize collateral damage, return to base. But straightforward missions had a way of becoming complicated when the enemy had prepared surprises. Viper flight, Mirror Lake. I'm tracking multiple heat sources moving within the target area. Looks like they know you're coming. Kaz's voice carried the tension of someone watching a tactical situation develop in real time. I count at least 12 personnel, plus vehicle signatures that suggest mobile command and control capability. Davidson's targeting pod painted the compound in stark infrared imagery. The buildings looked like geometric shapes against the mountain terrain, but the movement patterns Kaz had identified were clearly visible as white thermal signatures against the cooler background. Phoenix, you seeing this? Affirmative. They're not running for cover, they're taking positions. Marchetti's observation was correct. Instead of scattering when they detected incoming aircraft, the personnel below were moving with purpose, establishing defensive positions around the facility. This feels like they want us to attack. Mirror Lake, Viper 1. Recommend we reassess the threat picture. Enemy behavior suggests possible trap or ambush scenario. Davidson had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming warnings. From her position in the secure communications room, Kaz studied multiple data streams simultaneously. Satellite thermal imaging, radar tracking data, and signals intelligence all painted pieces of a larger tactical puzzle. Viper flight, I concur with your assessment. I'm seeing coordinated movement patterns that suggest advanced preparation. They may be using the facility as bait. The thought sent ice through Davidson's veins. If the compound was bait, then the real threat was still hidden, waiting for them to commit to the attack before revealing itself. Mirror Lake, what's your recommendation? Hold position and let me work the intelligence picture. Something about this setup feels familiar. There was a pause as Kaz cross-referenced the enemy's tactical deployment against historical patterns in her database. Then, with sudden certainty, Reaper, this is a textbook deception operation. The compound is a decoy. The real target is your aircraft. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. The SAM sites she'd identified weren't positioned to defend the compound. They were positioned to create a kill zone that the F-22s would enter when they began their attack run. The personnel moving around the facility weren't taking defensive positions. They were probably manning additional systems designed to track and engage the Raptors once they revealed their positions by attacking. Phoenix, break off approach. We're being hunted. Davidson's command came just as his radar warning receiver exploded with alarm tones. Multiple tracking radars had just gone active, painting his aircraft with targeting beams from positions he couldn't see. The trap had been sprung, and they were in the middle of it. Viper 1, this is Phoenix. I'm spiked by multiple systems. Recommend immediate defensive maneuvers. Marchetti's F-22 was already turning hard to starboard, dispensing chaff and flares as her electronic warfare systems attempted to break the radar locks that had found them. The first missile launch came from a position 2 miles north of the compound, a white streak ascending rapidly through the thin mountain air. Davidson's world compressed to the essential elements of survival: airspeed, altitude, threats, and countermeasures. The SA-15 missile climbing toward his aircraft was radar-guided, its seeker head locked onto the F-22's carefully minimized but not entirely eliminated radar signature. At 25,000 feet, he had room to maneuver, but the mountains below limited his options for evasive action. Phoenix, defend. Sam, launch. You're 6 o'clock. Davidson's warning came as a second missile streaked upward from the valley floor, this one targeting Marchetti's aircraft. The coordinated attack confirmed what they now understood. This had never been about the compound. It had always been about bringing down American fighters. Mirror Lake, Viper 1. We need immediate support for defensive maneuvering. Where are the threats? Davidson threw his F-22 into a diving turn, pulling 7 Gs as he tried to defeat the incoming missile's intercept geometry. The Raptor's stealth characteristics worked in his favor, but at close range, even reduced radar signatures could be tracked effectively. Kaz's voice cut through the cockpit alarms with clinical precision. Viper 1, threat is 3 o'clock low, range 2 miles. Missile is radar-guided, recommend notch left and dispense chaff. She paused for a heartbeat, then continued. Phoenix, you have a second SAM launching from your 9 o'clock position. Break right and go low, use the ridgeline to mask your signature. Both pilots responded instantly, their F-22s carving sharp arcs through the sky as they implemented Kaz's guidance. Davidson's maneuver placed the incoming missile at a 90-degree angle to his flight path, the geometry that made radar tracking most difficult. Behind him, a cloud of chaff bloomed like metallic snow, creating false targets that confused the missile's seeker head. Viper 1 missile is tracking chaff. You're clear. The relief in Kaz's voice was audible, but the celebration was premature. Phoenix, second missile is still tracking. Recommend immediate descent to Angels 5 and continue defensive maneuvering. Marchetti's F-22 dropped like a stone, her pilot using gravity and the Raptor's powerful engines to accelerate away from the threat. The SA-15 missile, designed for high-altitude intercepts, struggled to adjust to the sudden altitude change. But it was still tracking, still dangerous. Mirror Lake, Phoenix, missile is still locked on. Need options. Marchetti's voice carried the controlled stress of a pilot running out of maneuvering room. The mountain terrain below provided natural radar masking, but it also created a ceiling below which she couldn't safely operate. Kaz studied her tactical display, calculating intercept angles and missile kinematics in real time. Phoenix, in 3 seconds, pull up hard and dispense flares. The missile seeker is about to switch to infrared terminal guidance, if we can blind it at the transition point. She let the instruction hang unfinished. They all understood the physics involved. Copy, Mirror Lake, pulling up. Now, Marchetti hauled back on her stick, the F-22's nose rising sharply as flares streamed from her aircraft like falling stars. The missile, confused by the sudden signature change and blinded by infrared countermeasures, lost lock and detonated harmlessly 200 feet below her aircraft. For a moment, the radio was quiet except for the sound of 2 pilots breathing hard through their oxygen masks. They had survived the initial ambush, but they were far from safe. The tactical situation had shifted from a planned strike to a survival scenario. Both F-22s were now operating in a confirmed threat environment, their positions known to enemy forces that had demonstrated both sophisticated planning and effective execution. Davidson climbed back to a safer altitude while maintaining evasive maneuvering, his radar warning receiver still painting multiple threats across his display. Mirror Lake, Viper 1, we need to reassess our entire approach. This level of coordination suggests significant enemy capabilities. Davidson's voice carried the frustration of a pilot realizing that everything about their mission had been wrong from the start. Are we looking at state-level support here? From her communications station, Kaz was already pulling additional intelligence sources, trying to build a comprehensive picture of what they were facing. Viper 1, I'm seeing signatures consistent with advanced integrated air defense systems. This isn't improvised. Someone with serious military training planned this ambush. She paused, cross-referencing threat assessments. I'm also tracking electronic warfare activity that suggests they're trying to jam your communications with higher command. The implications were sobering. If enemy forces could coordinate missile attacks while simultaneously conducting electronic warfare operations, they were dealing with opponents who possessed military-grade equipment and training. The original mission parameters were no longer relevant. This had become a fight for survival against a peer-level threat. Phoenix, what's your system status? Davidson needed to know if his wingman's aircraft had sustained any damage during the missile engagement. All systems nominal, but I'm showing intermittent radar contacts that disappear when I try to lock them up. They're using the terrain and possibly electronic countermeasures to mask their positions. Marchetti's report confirmed what both pilots suspected. They were operating against an enemy that understood stealth technology and had developed tactics to counter it. Mirror Lake, Viper Flight. Recommend we extract and reassess with higher command. This threat level exceeds our mission parameters. Davidson's suggestion was tactically sound, but Kaz could see complications developing on her strategic display that the pilots couldn't. Negative, Viper 1. I'm tracking additional aircraft launching from airfields across the region. If you extract now, you'll be intercepted by enemy fighters before you reach friendly airspace. She highlighted the threats on her display, counting at least 6 fast-moving contacts converging on their general area. Someone activated a coordinated response across multiple installations. This isn't just about you anymore. The scope of the threat was expanding beyond anything their pre-mission briefing had suggested. What had begun as a routine strike against a weapons cache was now revealing itself as a comprehensive trap designed to eliminate high-value American air assets. The enemy had anticipated their capabilities, planned countermeasures for their tactics, and was executing a multi-layered operation that suggested months of preparation. Mirror Lake, what are our options? Davidson's question carried the weight of command responsibility. He had 2 of the Air Force's most advanced aircraft and 2 irreplaceable pilots under his control, and every decision he made would determine whether they returned home safely. Kaz stared at her tactical display, calculating odds and options with the methodical precision that had made her legendary among fighter pilots. The answer she was about to give would either save their lives or end her career permanently. Again. The silence stretched across the encrypted communication channel as Kaz analyzed the tactical puzzle that had enveloped the 2 F-22s. Her displays showed a complex web of threats: mobile SAM sites, incoming fighter aircraft, and electronic warfare systems, all coordinated in a pattern that suggested this operation had been planned for months. The enemy had studied American air tactics, identified vulnerabilities, and constructed a trap designed specifically to eliminate stealth fighters. Viper Flight, Mirror Lake. I have a solution, but it requires complete trust in my guidance. Kaz's voice carried a weight that both pilots recognized from their previous combat experience with her. I'm going to vector you through a route that appears to lead directly into the strongest concentration of enemy forces. In reality, it exploits a gap in their coverage that they don't know exists. Davidson felt his stomach tighten. Mirror Lake had never led him astray, but the proposed solution sounded like tactical suicide. Kaz, break it down for me. What exactly are you seeing that we're not? The enemy's integrated air defense system has one critical weakness. They're using standard Soviet-era coordination protocols. I helped develop the countermeasures for exactly this type of threat back when I was still flying. She paused, highlighting specific positions on her tactical display. If you approach from bearing 090 at Angels 12, you'll pass through a coordination boundary between their eastern and western SAM groups. For approximately 40 seconds, you'll be in dead space where neither system can effectively engage you. Marchetti's voice crackled through the radio. 40 seconds isn't much margin for error, Mirror Lake. What happens if your timing is off? Then you'll be engaged by multiple missile systems simultaneously, Kaz replied with characteristic honesty. But if we don't try this, you'll be intercepted by enemy fighters in approximately 8 minutes. Those are MiG-29s, and they're being vectored by ground-controlled intercept radar that knows exactly where you are. The tactical mathematics were brutal but clear. Stay and fight the SAMs with known countermeasures, or retreat into a fighter engagement with unknown odds. Davidson had flown against MiG-29s before, and while the F-22 possessed significant advantages, numerical superiority could quickly shift the balance of any air-to-air engagement. Mirror Lake Viper 1, send us the waypoints. We're trusting your analysis. Davidson's decision carried the weight of command authority, but it also reflected his faith in the woman who had guided him through impossible situations before. Phoenix, form on me. We're going to thread the needle. Both F-22s adjusted course toward the gap in enemy coverage that only Kaz could see. Her analysis was based on understanding how Soviet-trained air defense operators thought, how they coordinated their systems, and where the inevitable blind spots appeared in their coverage patterns. It was knowledge earned through years of studying enemy tactics and refined through actual combat experience. Viper Flight, you are 30 seconds from the gap. Maintain current heading and airspeed. Do not deviate regardless of what your threat warning systems tell you. Kaz's voice carried the calm authority of someone who had guided aircraft through similar situations dozens of times before. Davidson's radar warning receiver was screaming multiple threats, indicating that his aircraft was being tracked by several different systems. Every instinct developed through years of combat flying told him to maneuver defensively, but Mirror Lake's guidance required him to fly straight into what appeared to be certain death. Steady, Reaper, he whispered to himself, trusting in analysis he couldn't see from someone whose judgment had never failed him. The gap in enemy coverage lasted exactly 38 seconds. For those precious moments, both F-22s flew through airspace where multiple air defense systems could see them, but couldn't effectively engage due to coordination boundaries and overlapping coverage restrictions. It was a vulnerability that existed only because Kaz understood the doctrinal limitations of Soviet-era air defense networks better than the operators using them. Viper Flight, you're through the gap. Come right to heading 270 and begin descent to Angels 8. You're now positioned to attack the command and control node that's coordinating this entire operation. Kaz's voice carried satisfaction mixed with renewed focus. They had survived the most dangerous part of the route, but the mission was far from complete. Davidson could see the target on his display, a mobile command vehicle surrounded by communication arrays and defensive positions. It wasn't the original target they had been assigned, but it was clearly the brain controlling the coordinated attack that had nearly cost them their aircraft. Destroying it would disrupt the enemy's ability to coordinate their remaining forces. Phoenix, you seeing this? Davidson's targeting pod was painting a clear picture of the command site. Multiple vehicles, personnel moving between prepared positions, and communication equipment that represented a significant intelligence opportunity. Copy, Reaper. I'm seeing at least 20 personnel in what looks like a mobile radar system. Marchetti's analysis was accurate. The site represented both a target of opportunity and a significant threat to future American air operations in the region. Mirror Lake, are you recommending we engage? Kaz studied the tactical situation from every angle. The command site was clearly coordinating the attacks against the F-22s, but destroying it would also reveal their position to remaining enemy forces. The decision would determine whether they escaped safely or found themselves fighting their way out of an increasingly complex tactical situation. Viper Flight, Mirror Lake. I recommend engagement. That command node is coordinating attacks against American aircraft across 3 provinces. Take it down, and you'll save lives beyond just your own. Her voice carried the certainty of someone who understood the strategic implications of tactical decisions. But be prepared for immediate extraction after weapons release. They'll know exactly where you are. Davidson armed his weapons systems, feeling the familiar weight of combat responsibility settling over him. The original mission had been compromised, but a new objective had emerged from the tactical chaos. Sometimes the most important targets were the ones you discovered by accident. Phoenix, Viper 1. Time to earn our pay. Weapons hot, targeting the command vehicle. On my mark. Davidson's finger moved to the weapons release button as his targeting system achieved lock. In seconds, they would either eliminate a significant threat or paint themselves as targets for every remaining enemy system in the valley. The mission was about to reach its climax. Guided by the tactical genius of a woman, the world thought was pushing a mop. The AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile separated from Davidson's F-22 with a subtle thump that vibrated through the aircraft's frame. The weapon's small turbofan engine ignited, propelling the precision-guided munition toward the enemy command vehicle at over 500 miles per hour. From 8 miles away, the Raptor had delivered its payload while remaining outside the engagement envelope of most defensive systems. Viper 1, missile away. Time to target, 40 seconds. Davidson's voice carried the controlled tension of a pilot who had just committed to combat. There was no recalling the weapon now. The mission would succeed or fail based on the accuracy of their targeting and the effectiveness of their planned escape route. Marchetti's F-22 had lined up on a secondary target, the mobile radar system that was providing tracking data to the SAM sites throughout the valley. Phoenix, missile away, targeting the search radar. Her weapon followed a slightly different trajectory, designed to arrive at the target area within seconds of Davidson's strike. From her communications station, Kaz watched the tactical picture develop in real time. Both missiles were tracking their targets perfectly, but she could already see enemy forces beginning to react to the attack. Viper flight, I'm showing multiple heat sources moving rapidly away from the target area. Some of the personnel are escaping, but the command structure is about to be eliminated. The first explosion lit up the mountain valley like a miniature sun. Davidson's missile found the command vehicle with surgical precision, the blast vaporizing the mobile command post and its sophisticated communication equipment. Secondary explosions followed as fuel and ammunition stores detonated, creating a pillar of fire that could be seen for miles. Direct hit on primary target, Davidson reported. Command vehicle is destroyed, multiple secondary explosions observed. His satisfaction was tempered by immediate concern for their escape route. Every enemy system in the region now knew exactly where they were. Marchetti's missile struck the radar installation 3 seconds later, eliminating the search system that had been providing targeting data to the surrounding SAM sites. The loss of coordinated radar coverage would significantly degrade the enemy's ability to track the F-22s, but mobile systems could still pose a threat if the Raptors remained in the area. Phoenix, direct hit on radar target. Secondary target destroyed. Marchetti's report confirmed what Kaz could see on her displays, 2 successful strikes against high-value targets that would significantly disrupt enemy operations throughout the region. Viper flight, Mirror Lake. Outstanding work, but now comes the hard part. I need you to egress immediately on heading 045, maximum afterburner. The remaining SAM sites are trying to re-establish communications, and I'm tracking at least 4 additional mobile launchers moving to intercept your escape route. Both F-22s turned sharply toward the northeast, their pilots pushing the throttles forward into afterburner range. The Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines responded with increased thrust that pressed them back into their ejection seats. At full power, the Raptors could outrun most surface-to-air missiles, but they would need to maintain that speed advantage until they reached friendly airspace. Mirror Lake, Viper 1. We're showing multiple radar contacts ahead of our flight path. Are those the enemy fighters you mentioned earlier? Davidson's radar display was painting several fast-moving targets that appeared to be moving to intercept their escape route. Kaz confirmed their worst fears. Affirmative, Viper 1. 4 MiG-29s vectored by ground control to your intercept point. They're approximately 6 minutes from merge with your current flight path. She paused, calculating options with desperate speed. I can vector you around them, but it adds 15 minutes to your flight time and keeps you in SAM range longer. The tactical equation was becoming increasingly complex. Avoid the fighters and face extended exposure to surface-to-air missiles, or engage the MiGs and risk air-to-air combat against numerical odds. Either choice carried significant risks, and time was running out for a decision. The encrypted radio channel crackled with tension as both pilots processed their limited options. In the distance, the fires from their successful strikes continued to burn, marking the location where American air power had struck back against a sophisticated enemy trap. But the victory would be meaningless if they couldn't survive to report their success. Davidson's voice cut through the tactical uncertainty with the authority of command decision. Mirror Lake, Viper 1. We're going to engage the fighters. Vector us to intercept. The hunt was about to become the hunted, and everything would depend on the tactical guidance of Mirror Lake. The 4 MiG-29 Fulcrums rose from their base like predatory birds, their twin engines leaving contrails against the mountain sky. Each aircraft carried a full air-to-air missile loadout, 2 radar-guided R-27s for long-range engagement, and 4 infrared-seeking R-73s for close combat. The pilots were experienced, their aircraft upgraded with modern avionics, and their mission was clear: prevent the American stealth fighters from escaping. Viper Flight, Mirror Lake. Enemy fighters are climbing to Angel's 25 estimated intercept in 4 minutes. They're using standard Soviet intercept doctrine, trying to force you into a head-on engagement where their numerical advantage matters most. Kaz's analysis came rapidly as she processed the developing air-to-air situation. Recommend you maintain current altitude and use your stealth advantage to achieve first-shot capability. Davidson acknowledged while studying his tactical display. The F-22's advanced radar could track the approaching MiGs while remaining largely invisible to their older systems. This stealth advantage was the Raptor's primary tactical benefit in air-to-air combat: the ability to see without being seen, to shoot without being engaged. Phoenix, Viper 1. We'll take them in pairs. I'll engage the lead element, you handle the trailers. Use AMRAAMs at maximum range and be prepared to maneuver defensively after missile release. Davidson's tactical plan.